The worst investment I ever made? How long do you have? Oh, I've made some very bad ones, but that doesn't really bother me. It may bother the shareholders, but that's another question. You're gonna make mistakes in life. I mean, there's no question about it. You don't want to make them on the big decisions, who you marry and some things like that. So there's no way I'm going to make a lot of business and investment decisions without making some mistakes.
But buying Berkshire Hathaway itself was a mistake because Berkshire was a lousy textile business. And I bought it very cheap. I'd been taught by Ben Graham to buy things on a quantitative basis. Look around for things that are cheap. And that I was taught that, say, in 1949 or 50. It made a big impression on me. So I went around looking for what I call used cigar butts of stocks. And the cigar butt approach to buying stocks is that you walk down the street and you're looking around for cigar butts and you find this on the street, this terrible looking, soggy, ugly looking cigar, one puff left in it. But you pick it up and you get your one puff. Disgusting, you throw it away, but it's free. I mean, it's cheap. And then you look around for another soggy, one puff cigarette. Well, that's what I did for years. It's a mistake.
Hi, I'm Marissa Pont. I'm a senior management major. Obviously, as a public, what we hear most about are your successful investing in ventures or the new products that you develop that work out. I was just wondering, what would you consider to be the worst investment you've ever made?
The worst investment I ever made? How long do you have? Oh, I've made some very bad ones, but that doesn't really bother me. It may bother the shareholders, but that's another question. You're gonna make mistakes in life. I mean, there's no question about it. You don't want to make them on the big decisions, who you marry and some things like that. So there's no way I'm going to make a lot of business and investment decisions without making some mistakes. I may try to minimize them. I don't dwell on them at all. I don't look back. The biggest mistakes are the ones that actually don't show up. They're the mistakes of omission rather than commission. We've never lost that much money on any one investment. But it's the things that I knew enough to do that I didn't do. We have missed profits of as much as, maybe $10 billion in things that I knew enough to do and I didn't do. Now,
let's talk about IBM for a moment.
Yeah.
And you've said that it was a mistake. We all make mistakes.
It was my mistake.
I make my fair share. But let's go over what you learned from that mistake. I mean, you, as I say, generally you find business you believe in over the long term and management you believe in. What went wrong?
Well, I've made lots of mistakes. That's part of the game. I mean, there is no way in the investment business, somebody says to you they never made a mistake, check them out. But that was a fairly large commitment. And I would say that the competition, what's really fascinating to me actually is what Amazon did with the cloud. I mean, here is a company that you don't even think of as being in that business 6 or 7 years ago. And Jeff Bezos has really taken something, like you wouldn't have thought they'd be doing that. And from a standing start, and he has even said on Charlie Rose, he was amazed at how much runway he was given. But here are a bunch of very smart people in the tech industry around him, and not just IBM, but Microsoft, Google, you name it. I mean, the people. And they all let them have a big lead, and you don't want to let a smart fellow have a big lead.
Time is the enemy of the lousy business. I could have sold Berkshire, perhaps liquidated it, and made a quick little profit, one puff. But staying with those kind of businesses is a big mistake. So you might say I learned something out of that mistake, and I would have been way better off taking. What I did with Berkshire is I kept buying better businesses. I started the insurance business, See's Candy, the Buffalo, all kinds of things. I would have been way better doing that with a brand new little entity that I'd set up rather than using Berkshire as the platform. Now I've had a lot of fun out of it. I mean, everything in life seems to turn out for the better, so I don't have any complaints about that, but it was a dumb thing to do. I went into US Air. I bought a preferred stock in 1989. As soon as my check cleared, the company went into the red and never got out. I mean, it was a really dumb. I mean, I've got an 800 number I call now whenever I think about buying an airline stock. I call them up any hour that, fortunately, I can call them at 3 in the morning, and I just dial and I say, my name's Warren, I'm an arrowholic, you know, and I'm thinking about buying this thing, and then they talk me down. I mean, it takes hours sometimes, but it's worth it, believe me. If you ever think about that buying an airline stock, call me and I'll give you the 800 number, because you don't want to do it.
The fact I didn't buy Microsoft way back is not a foregone opportunity, because I didn't know enough to make that decision. But there have been other investments where I did know enough to make the decision, and for one reason or another, I either didn't do it at all or I did it on a small scale. I was sucking my thumb when I should have been writing checks, you know, basically. And you know, those don't show up. You know, there's no place where it shows missed opportunities, but I've missed some big ones. The triumphs in life are partly triumphs because you know that everything isn't going to be a triumph. And I would never get too hung up on mistakes. I know a lot of people that really agonize over them, and it just isn't worth it. I mean, tomorrow's another day, and you live it forward and just go on to the next thing.
I don't worry about that if it's Microsoft, because I don't know it, because Microsoft isn't in my circle of competence. And so I don't have any reason to think I'm entitled to make money out of Microsoft or out of cocoa beans or whatever. But I did know enough to understand Fannie Mae, and I blew it. And that never shows up under conventional accounting. But I know the cost of it. I know, you know, I passed it up. And those are the big, big mistakes. And I've had plenty of them. And unless I tell you about them in the annual report, and I resist the temptation sometimes, unless I tell you about them in the annual report, you're not going to know it because it doesn't show up under conventional accounting. But omission is way bigger than commission. There's big opportunities in life have to be seized. We don't do very many things, but when we get the chance to do something that's right and big, we've got to do it. And even to do it in a small scale is just as big a mistake almost as not doing it at all. I mean, you've really got to grab them when they come, because you're not going to get 500 great opportunities. You would be better off if, when you got out of school here, you got a punch card with 20 punches on it. And every financial decision you made, you used up a punch. You'd get very rich because you'd think through very hard each one. I mean, you went to a cocktail party and somebody talked about a company you didn't even understand what they did or couldn't pronounce the name, but they made some money last week and another one like it. You wouldn't buy it if you only had 20 punches on that card. There's a temptation to dabble, particularly during bull markets. In stocks, it's so easy. You know, it's easier now than ever because you can do it online. You know, just you click it in and maybe it goes up a point and you get excited about that and you buy another one the next day and so on. You can't make any money over time doing that. But if you had a punch card with only 20 punches, you weren't going to get another one the rest of your life. You would think a long time before every investment decision, and you would make good ones and you'd make big ones. And you probably wouldn't even use all 20 punches in your lifetime, but you wouldn't need to. I've been taught by Ben Graham to buy things on a quantitative basis.
The biggest mistakes are the ones that actually don't show up. Well, I've made lots of mistakes. That's part of the game. I mean,
Time is the enemy of the lousy business. I could have sold Berkshire, perhaps liquidated it, and made a quick little profit.
I would never get too hung up on mistakes. I know a lot of people that really agonize over them, and it just isn't worth it. I mean, tomorrow's another day, and you live it forward and just go on to the next thing.
Those are the big, big mistakes, and I've had plenty of them. Unless I tell you about them in the annual report, and I resist the temptation sometimes, unless I tell you about them in the annual report, you're not going to know it because it doesn't show up under conventional accounting.